Okay, good morning, everyone. So we are at the bottom of 40b, starting the new parak. And now we're going to discuss what is actually Avodah Zarah. We've been discussing about restrictions, what you can eat, what you can drink, if it's been involved. But what is the actual, like the idol, the statue? So, Mishnah starts out every selim, every statue. Um, I guess of a any kind of figure is forbidden to have hana. Because even if you don't often see it being worshipped, any statue that's made by idol worshippers, you can assume at least once a year they're going to be worshiping it. And therefore becomes also Dibur Rabbi Meir. But the rabbis say, not every statue. There are certain symbols which indicate that this is being used for Avodah Zarah, and that is if the figure being depicted is holding a staff, or a bird, or a ball. The Gemara will explain why. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af kol sheyesh bi'elo kol davar. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says a regular statue is not forbidden, not assumed to be a Zarah, but if it's holding anything, then it is forbidden. So the Gemara says, "Eden about my Talmud Rabbanan." So if it's true that that any statue is worshipped once a year, at least once a year, then why would the rabbis exempt unless it's holding one of these symbols? It's a question of local custom. Where Rabbi Meir lived, that was the practice. That any statue that was made, it was for purposes of Avodah Zarah, at least once a year. Rabbi Meir, the Chayish Lamuta, Gazar So Rabbi Meir extended this prohibition to every place. It's like he was saying, not only in my place, but because in certain a minority of places like mine, this is the case. So I'm going to make it forbidden in every place. That any kind of statue, don't take a chance. Don't get hung up from it. So the rabbis recognized that yes, in Rabbi Meir's place there was a practice that any statue was served, was worshipped. However, we're not going to extend that to other places where it might not be the case, or likely not the case. Rabbi Yehuda says what we're talking about is um, if it's a memorial or a statue of a king, if the statue is situated such that you suspect that it's the likeness of a king or to honor a king, so that kings would be worshipped as gods. So in that case, we have to be more concerned. What are we talking about? Whether there are statues of kings? It's only if it's like at the city gate, where you could expect that's where you're going to put your venerated figures. That may be the case when it comes to a village. So if you have a village and there's a large monument at the entrance to the village, then that we can be assumed is going to be worshipped. But a large city, then we don't assume that it's a Zarah. It's okay to get an off from it. My tunnel, why? Well, no, I have because this is not necessarily, or there's just the fact that it's there doesn't indicate that the subject is a god. It indicates that it's just the city puts up monuments to itself, as it were. There is architecture, and there's grandeur to a city that it wishes to express its own grandeur, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Avodah Zarah. So the rest of the Kfarim Mi'ikal Mandi Amar L'Naitav Dilahu. Is it so that in the villages, and it continues that in the villages, nobody's going to think that they're doing it for their own grandeur because they don't have any grandeur. In the village, who's got the money or the desire to glorify the city, the village? If there's something there, the kfarim, if there's a statue there, it's definitely for worship. Eli Itmar, Hachi Itmar. So like the Gemara says, everybody would agree that. Um, so Eli Itmar, Hachi Itmar, Rav Machokas V'Shel Krachim V'Shel Kfarim Divrei Kol Asuri. Um, so we're going to switch what Rava says, that the Machokas is only in cities, right? That some say that that the statue in the city is for the glorification of the city, and some say it could be for the glorification of the subject, and it's Avodah Zarah. But in the village, everybody would agree that it is that that it must be Avodah Zarah, because a village wouldn't put up a monument to itself. Okay. So the machlokas of the Mishnah was between Reb Meir and Rabbanan, if it matters if the statue is holding these particular objects, a stick, a ball, or a bird. So what's the deal with these? Makel, what's the deal with the stick? Sharodas asmo tapas kolom kulo kumaken. The stick indicates that it's holding dominion over, literally over itself, but over the world, or over what its dominion. The stick indicates mastery, and that indicates that it is for worship. Tzipor, what's the deal with a bird? Why is holding a bird a symbol of anything? Shatofes es atzon tachas kolom kulo tzipor. It's it's showing that it's like a bird. Like, think of an eagle, right? An eagle is like kind of flying over everything. It's mastery, demonstrating its mastery over everything. That's an indication of something that is to be worshipped. On Kadur, what's the deal with the ball? Shatofis is not so much skull and cool Kadur. It's like a symbol of the globe, right? That it's holding the whole world in its hand. That's a symbol of mastery, and therefore we assume that it was for worship. Tana, the Brisa Hosifu land, they added on to this list of symbols that indicate something about Zarah. Sayef, a Tara, a tabas, a sword, a crown, and a ring. Why? What's the symbolism of these things? Sayef, Makar, Saba, or at least to be Alma, Makar, Saba. First they thought, what's the deal with a sword? At least in Balma, like, why did they add this on? Because originally they thought, oh, the sword is just a symbol of um, of having the power to confiscate property, right? In other words, you're dominating, but you're a criminal. You're not a god. You're a criminal dominating dominating the area. But then they understood. So they thought Shahori Gatasmo Tapas Kula that um, that it's holding dominion over the whole world, saying like I have the power of life and death over you, and that is an object of worship. Atara, why did they add on the crown? Mekar Savar Gadel Kalile Baalma. First they thought, oh, this is not a symbol of anything, because it's just decorative, right? It's just an ornament. So then they understood that, no, you know what, this is really a symbol of ruling. Having a crown is a symbol of ruling over something or over people, and therefore it's an object of worship. Tabas, what about a ring? Mekar Savar. First they thought there's no big deal about the ring. Ishtaima Baalma. It's just it's like a signet ring. Like, a lot of officials have signet rings. Doesn't mean you have the power of a god. Well, the suffer, but then they understood so that the signet ring is actually a symbol that is showing that this statue has dominion over the whole world. It can use its signet ring to sign death warrants, death sentences, and so it is symbolizing something that is to be worshipped. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said anything, if it's holding anything, then that's a symbol of being a god. What did he think? Even like a splinter of wood. By Ravashi, tafas biyado soamahu. Okay, so you're saying anything. What if it's holding excrement, right? Miamrinan kuleamos yiluba bekitsoa. Doesn't mean, is it a sign of being denigrated, right? That this statue is crap, you might say. Oh, Dilma, whom you did zeal be apte kulielmo kasoa, or is it that the statue which is holding excrement is demonstrating its disdain for the whole world, that it can, it can rule over it as if it were a piece of excrement. Teku, so we don't know if holding anything includes holding excrement as a sign of dominion. Okay, next mission. Hamotze Shivrit Slamim. If you find pieces of an idol, of a statue, Harelu Mutarim, that's okay. And the Gemara will analyze this a little more. Matzah Tavnis Yad or Tavnis Regal. If you find a complete hand or a complete foot, Harelu Asurim, that is forbidden. That's still a Bazar. Because there are such things where you have, just the foot is being venerated, just the hand is being venerated. So if you find the whole hand, even though it's only part of a statue, it could still be the object of veneration. Amar Shmuel, Filu Shivra Avodah Zarah. Shmuel says, like this statue that you find pieces of, even if you knew that the original statue was an idol being worshipped, it's still permitted. This is strange. So wait, first of all, the Mishnah said broken pieces of statues, not of specifically of gods, of idols. So Gemara answers, "Hu adina filu shivrei avodah zarah." The Mishnah actually meant to include even pieces of idols. Why did it specify broken pieces of statues? Because in the end of the Mishnah, we're going to say because in the end of the Mishnah, it's going to be talking about slumming, like the hand, even of a regular statue, if it's just a hand, it's a problem because the hand might have been worshipped by somebody. So that's why the beginning of the Mishnah, continue or mentions the same way as the Seifa. It mentions statues, but really it means idols as well, of course. So now we have a Mishnah. Matzah tafnis yad v'tafnis regel l'asurin minei shekers ben neva. That's our Mishnah. Amai. Why is that? It's broken. So if it's broken, then it's been kind of decommissioned. It's on the pedestal. So if it's still on the pedestal, if it was found on the pedestal, so that is the case in which we can assume that it is an object of worship. Idmar. Avodah Zarah shenishtabra me'elecha. An idol that was broken, like it wasn't deliberately. Oh, so I should have mentioned that. Like, why is it that pieces of the idol, if it's broken, you would think that they are still, the source of them is an Avodah Zarah source. So the answer is that if it was broken by an idol worshiper, then it's kind of decommissioned, right? This shows that he's lost faith in this idol, and so it can actually become no longer Avodah Zarah. So now the Gemara says, what if it's accidentally broken? Okay, it wasn't deliberately broken. Rabbi Yochanan says it's still forbidden. Rosh Lakish says it's permitted. Why? Rabbi Yochanan because there was no intention to decommission it. Rabbi Shimon, so it's still a banzar. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar Muteras, Mistama Batulin Mivatala. So sure, there was no intention to destroy it, to break it, but if an idol gets broken, then one can assume that the worshipers are going to lose faith in it, right? What kind of idol? Because people will say, the idol can't even save itself. So it's going to help me. It's not going to help me. It's not. They're going to lose faith in it, in its power, and therefore it is no longer a Zarah. So there was this case in the Navi about when the Aron was placed in the by the Plishtim in base Dagon, in this house, in this temple of Dagon, the god, um, and next morning they came and they found that the statue of Dagon had fallen down and broken, and its head and its hands were, had broken off. Uksiv, and then it says, "Akim leyiduchud kohen Dagon." And then from then on, they wouldn't step on the portal of this temple. So doesn't it? It sounds like, um, they. Um, that they still venerated it, right? That they wouldn't go in there. So Gemara says, "No, I'm only Misham, right? You're going to prove from that. Hasam Shem Nishan said Dog and Gov is like Mishtan." No, it's not that they still venerated Dagon. They transferred their allegiance to the portal of the temple, right? If they found the broken pieces of the statue on the portal, so now they're going to venerate the portal. That's why they wouldn't step on the portal. So then now Dagon is no longer venerated, but now it's the portal of the entryway. Okay. Esve. Amotzi Shibra Islamin. If you find pieces of a statue, Hare Limutar. Shibra Avodah Zarah Surin. Okay, so from this statement, we'd say it's only statue. If you find statue pieces that you didn't know were Avodah Zarah before, those are okay, but that implies that if you knew it were Avodah Zarah, it's still forbidden. Gemara says, "Lo tein shibra avodah zarah b'Yisrael." And no, don't make that assumption. What it's trying to tell you is by mentioning statues, pieces of statues, it's saying, yeah, pieces of statues are okay, are no longer forbidden, but the whole statue itself, as we saw in our Mishnah, that is forbidden. So the Ustama Rabbi Meir, and that would be Rabbi Meir's opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan, Mida Rabbi Meir, Nishmal Hula Rabbanan. Um, um, a second. So wouldn't we conclude as follows? Lav Amar Rabbi Meir, didn't Rabbi Meir say Slami Masurim, um, full statues are forbidden. Sivra Slami Mutarim. So pieces would be, why would they be permitted? Like, why wouldn't you have the parallel, right? If Rabbi Meir says, if we're interpreting the Mishnah to mean that Rabbi Meir says broken pieces of statues are permitted, implying that whole statues are forbidden. So the same should apply. The same it should be. We should understand parallelly that the Rabbanan, the Chachamim, would say that Avodah Zarah, an actual idol, its pieces would be permitted. Hachi hashta. So is that so? Amar avodim, amar lo avodim. In the case of Slamim, the statues, we don't know if they were ever worshipped. So let's assume that the Imtim Salomar Avodim, and even if they were worshipped, Amar Bitlum. So we can see that there's a that they were decommissioned, right? But Avodah Zarah, Vaday of Miyamar de Bitla. So that's a case of suffix, right? You have a statue, you don't know if it was worshipped, so you have a suffix, right? Maybe it's permitted, maybe it's forbidden. If it's broken, then it becomes like a further suffix. But in the case of Avodah Zarah Vaday, if it's certainly Avodah Zarah, then you need something more positive to cancel that knowledge. Like, how do you know that they decommissioned it? Have a suffix uvada and suffix motzi mitei vada. You can't have if you have an established fact that it was an idol, then you need definite proof that it was decommissioned. The fact that it's broken, you don't know for sure. Maybe it broke by itself. Main suffix motzi mitei vada. Sigmar says, wait a minute. So I'll show you other cases where you have a definite fact established, a vadai, and it can be canceled. It can be that is that knowledge can be canceled even by a suffix, by an uncertainty. Here's the proof. Tanya. You have a chaver, a Talmud Chacham, someone who's reliable about Trumas and Masros, right? And he dies, and he's got a storehouse full of produce. Even if you know that produce was just harvested today, and then he died, we're still going to assume that before he died, like immediately upon when they became eligible for Truma and Maser, he was separated Truma and Maser right away. Um, so in that case, the Vadai Tavile, you know that originally there was definitely, the produce before, when it's harvested, it definitely had a period of tevel where has not had Truma Master taken from yet. Uh, and now Suffolk Astrinus, Suffolk Law Astrinus. So now now it belongs to a Chaver, but you don't know for sure. Like he may have not gotten around to it yet. Maybe he died suddenly before he got to separate Truma and Maser. So that's a suffix because it's suffix mostly divana, and you're saying that no, that the even this uncertain uh, premise that the chaver separated trumas and masers takes it out of the category that we knew it was originally not taken truma and maser. So we see that the suffix does cancel a vada. Gemara says no. Hasam Bali Bali. There, we're talking about two claims which are both certain, right? The Vadai Esrei, because we're elevating the assumption that the Chaver separated True and Maser to a fact. Like we think of this as a fact. Diamar Rabbi Chanina Chazak, as Rabbi Chanina says, Chazak al Chaver Shein Mosim Davar Shein Musukum Mitachas Yado. There's a Chazaka that a Chaver won't allow anything to leave his possession without having true and master taken from it. So the chazaka is strong enough, is a strong piece of evidence, as much as our certain knowledge that that this produce was at one point tevel, was one point did not have truma masters taken from it, but the chazaka that it belongs to a chaver is of equal weight in terms of evidence. That it is strong enough to stand up against that vadai. So it's a vadai versus vadai, not a suffix versus vadai. Or you could say, Meikar Motvile suffix v'suffix after the Abad could Rabbi Oshaya. Or you could say it's not a Badai against a Badai. The Chazaka is, it's evidence, but it's not as strong as a known fact. But the idea that it was Tevel to begin with is a suffix. Why? How could you avoid? How could something how could it not be Tevel? Diamar Marim Adamon Tuasu Machnisa Bamos Shalom. Rabbi Oshaya says there's a way that you can take produce from your field, you can harvest, and never have it become subject to truma maser. And how do you do that? If you bring it in its most, I think, is the husk, right? Yeah, so it's like unprocessed. So if you haven't processed it enough, it never becomes tevel, never becomes subject to truma maser.
So it is tevel. Still tevel then, right?
But it's tevel, but it never became subject to requiring truma maser. But the way I'm using the word tevel is that it's you harvested it and you're required to separate truma and maser, but you didn't. In this case, this is a way to beat the system, to game the system, so that it never becomes subject to truma and maser.
Well, what's Rashi when Rashi says lo yim rachena bekriya begorin? That means he didn't mash it up in the gorin.
I think so. I don't remember exactly what the process is.
Didn't crush it.
I'm not sure. Anybody know offhand? But there's some part of the processing, like where it has to be
The meruachu.
yeah, some part is
That's
the
Meruach or Gamar Melacha, Rashi says.
Gemara Malach. Okay, yes. So
It's
the
part of the
kind of
process, Gamar Melacha.
yeah. So if you haven't done that, and then Kanisha Behemto Chamos Upra Min Maser, so then you can feed it to your animal because it has never yet become subject to Maser. So maybe this is what the guy did, and maybe this chaver who died with a warehouse full of produce, maybe that produce never became subject to Maser, right? So the chazaka that he would give Maser versus is strong enough to um, to allow us to assume that indeed this is not, there's no requirement here of Maser.
But if you
Either
go back to
because
the
it,
suffix issue of the
Mhm.
suffix, why would we not say suffix the right the chumrah, right? So truma is a deraita, isn't it? Min Torah.
Yeah.
So
So
therefore, if there is a suffix, and we're assuming that's it. Now we're trying to say that maybe it wasn't. But if we say there's a suffix, then and he has to give truma min Torah, then we would say, well, he didn't give truma, right? If we
well,
hold
we have, but we have reason to believe that maybe he did because he's a
right,
chaver, right?
yeah, okay,
So
but
it's a doraisa, but it's a suffix versus a suffix. In other words, it's a suffix that was required that truma was required in the first place. Okay, but if it was required, then it's a suffix that likely the person had already done so, had
do
already
you say
taken.
it's fake sveka then?
No, it's not quite as fake. Well, maybe it is. Like it's even if he did. Is it the same?
I'm not sure. I'm
I don't
asking.
think it's quite this. Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's quite the same. What we're talking about here is competing claims, right? As fake is like even if uh, the condition A obtains, maybe condition B obtains also, and so um, the thing is not required. Here it's a little bit different. It probably operates more or less in the same way. It's a little bit different in that you have two competing claims. Um, I'm not sure if it's different. It's a good question. Mm, maybe you're right. Like I think maybe it is the same as this fake fake. Um, okay. Let's see, just a second.
Ain't suffix motzimi devade. That's where you are.
Yeah. Okay. The in suffix mostly mean devadai, but is it the case that again we're going to challenge this by saying actually a suffix can release a vadai. Did you hear that? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. They told me I could use it till 9. Hang on one second, guys. I'll be right with you. Bad move like patience. Okay, sorry. The insult of mostly mean devane. So are we still going to say? Um, oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second, please. Okay, so vein suffix mostly made Avodah. Is it true that you can't use a suffix to cancel Avodah? Another example. I'm going to read that. Maaseh b'shifchasko, so make tekecha b'rima. Um, there was some strong man in a place called Rima. The Shetil Nefil Labor. Um, um, 1 second. That put a stillbirth in the pit. Ubal Coin Vehexis Leda Im Zachar Nekeva. The coin came to see if it was a male or female child. Ubama The rabbis um, um, yeah, and then he said to the rabbi, like, am I tummy or not? And they said, you're tahar. Because, um, if you didn't find anything, it may be that it was snatched by a wild animal. So, we know that there was a source of tuma there to begin with. Suffolk Guru, Suffolk Guru. And we have a suffix, was it still there? Maybe an animal carried it off because the suffix Motzim Devali that said he's stillbirth. So that means that the suffix that an animal dragged off this stillbirth prevails over the certain knowledge that it was there to begin with. Well, that's just no. No, the story, you got the story. It's not that we know that he put a stillbirth in the pit. We saw him put something in the pit. We don't know. Like maybe it was human, maybe it was not human. Maybe it causes tumor, maybe not. And then we have the suffix of maybe it was dragged away. So it's a suffix versus a suffix. So wait a minute. You're saying that this coin, he wanted to know if it was a male or female. So doesn't that imply that he knew it was a human? That it was human. So hachikam is what he say. Later im ruach hipila im nefel hitila. No, it's not that he wanted to know if it was male or female. He was checking to see if like how it got there. Like or if it was really if it was just the form of a human or it was really human. So that's what he was checking. So in other words, nobody knows if it was a human stillbirth or not to begin with. And if he had found that it was human, then he wanted to know if it was male or female. So it wasn't that he knew it was human. He wanted to check if is it human, and if so, is it male or female? Or you could say that that maybe indeed it was certain that there was a stillbirth here, but it's also certain that if it were, then it would have been dragged away because there are a lot of wild animals around here. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. Have a good day, everybody.